qualified performance early on today, don't you? It was something quite extraordinary. So often the king of qualifying, Jorge Martin, who strides into the Prima Pramac box to start from the front row of the grid. Many looked in his direction when the sprint format was announced. We expected it to play beautifully into the hands of Jorge Martin with his explosive single lap pace. 12 laps ahead of us in the Tissot sprint this afternoon. Martin goes from the front row and he will surely go for broke on the opening lap of this race.
Did not quite nail a clean lap at the end of that vital Q2 this morning, otherwise felt like he had a good shout at pole position. It broke his great run of qualifying results, and he'd finished 2022 with 3 consecutive poles, but it is now 5 successive front row starts for the Martinator. He completes that front row. His Prima Pramac racing teammate Johan Zarco, you got to go all the way back down to the head of row 4 to find the Frenchman. He's in 10th place. Zarco, of course, was the pole man here in Portimao 1 year ago when he took second in an All-France 1-2 behind Fabio Quartararo.
As the drone gives us some spectacular overhead shots of the start-finish straight, we look at Aleix Espargaro within the Aprilia box. He also had a crash earlier on this morning, which certainly halted his progress. He starts from 12th on the grid. It's been a rough weekend for the Espargaro family, of course. Paul Espargaro will not be taking part in the Tissot sprint after a horrible crash yesterday afternoon in practice 2. With a broken jaw, also broken bones in his vertebra as well. We wish Paul Espargaro all the best as he watches on this afternoon.
Yeah, and you know that regardless of what condition he's in, Paul Espargaro is going to be watching this Grand Prix. He's a fighter, he's a warrior, and as Lewis said, we echo those sentiments. We wish him a very rapid recovery. Now then, what lies in store in this Tissot sprint race for this young man? Monster Energy Yamaha MotoGP rider Fabio Quartararo. A mountain to climb here around the elevation changes in Portimao. 11th quickest at the end of that dramatic Q2 session this morning. Quartararo found a 1:37.920, which ordinarily in Portimao is a very respectable lap time. It's just the goalposts have been completely moved. As you mentioned, Marc Marquez, that 1:37.226 was 1.5 seconds under Pecco Bagnaia's previous pole record here on the Algarve coast. We know how Fabio Quartararo has struggled to make overtakes. He'll be concerned about front tyre pressure. You don't have to worry about rear tyre endurance, you don't have to worry about fuel conservation. But Fabio Quartararo, it's an uphill task, isn't it, coming from 11th on the grid? Not just today, but as a reminder, he'll have to start tomorrow's feature race also from the middle of that 4th row.
If you'd said to him before the Portimao test, or even at the end of it, you can take a 1:37.9 in the first qualifying session of the season, I dare say Fabio Quartararo would have said, yeah, I'll sign for that. But he's ending up 11th on the grid. Jack Miller in picture a moment ago. He starts from the middle of the 2nd row. Precious few of us expected to see him on the KTM that high up the grid. We all wondered when he set that blockbuster lap at the end of practice 2 yesterday, how on earth did Jack Miller pull that one out of the bag? Well, based on what happened this morning, we shouldn't have been so surprised.
No, it was quality, wasn't it, from Miller? We thought at one stage he might actually be on pole position. He had it with about 2.5 minutes to go, and then all hell broke loose. The fireworks were lit, weren't they, here in Portimao? They're going to be lit as well in about 15 minutes' time. That's 3 p.m. local time when the warm-up lap will start for this history-making Grand Prix. Both Muni VR46 Ducati riders find themselves on row 3. Their top man, Marco Bezzecchi, although it has been a bit of a crash-strewn weekend so far for Valentino Rossi's squad. Bez was down on the road yesterday in P2 at turn 9. A very fast crash there on an outlap on a cold left-hand side of his tyre. And very uncharacteristically, he's not a crasher at all. The 25-year-old Italian teammate Luca Marini, he's been on the deck twice already so far. He was down this morning in free practice on his outlap, a little clip on the back of Jack Miller's KTM as the drone then follows the pack down out of the sighting lap into the plunge down into the first corner. That's where Pecco Bagnaia went down heavily this morning. Thankfully, he was okay.
Pit lane will be open for 5 minutes. If you're new to this format, of course, and we're all new to it, we should just explain to you how the points will be handed out in this Tissot sprint. The top 9 riders will score points. If you're familiar with the Super Pole race format in World Superbikes, it's the same point system, but if you're not, 12 for the winner, 9 for second place, 7 for third, and then it counts down 6 down to 1 for the remaining top 9 finishers.
And a tweak to this year's Michelin tyre allocation. It's as you were in terms of the fronts, 3 compounds available, soft, medium and hard, and then it'll be a combination of either the soft, medium, soft hard or medium hard as we move through the season in terms of the rear. The Michelin options here this weekend for both both races, or for the sprint today and the Grand Prix tomorrow, are the soft rear and the medium rear. Of course, with the half race distance, 12 laps, I'd be gobsmacked if anybody went for anything other than the soft in this 12-lap dash for cash. Quartararo then, desperate to wrestle the title away from Ducati and Bagnaia. That was not what he was expecting this morning. He was saying yesterday he really hopes that Yamaha can develop and evolve through the course of the season. They normally stagnate, they have a promising winter, and then they don't develop at the same rate as their rivals, in particular Ducati. And Pirelli says that trend has to be bucked this year, otherwise they can forget any hopes of winning back the title he won so brilliantly in 2021.
You rode on board briefly there with Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia. If you notice, the audio sounding even better than normal, some brand new microphones in those onboard cameras, bringing you the best possible sound in motorsport. And it is fascinating to see what the different approaches will be to this Tito sprint. Of course, there are some riders in this field who are particularly good over the longer race distance, who are so good late in the Grand Prix itself. Enea Bastianini, of course, is among those riders who is so good late in a Grand Prix. He can't afford to save anything for the latter stages in this one, because of course it is such a frenetic race. But there are some riders like Marc Marquez who perhaps won't have been expecting to be so high up the grid, who might well feel he's got nothing to lose here.
This is no holds barred racing in the extreme. The riders don't have to worry about tyre consumption, they don't have to worry about fuel economy. Technically interesting Grand Prix coming up. Simon, you've got some tech observations before the riders start this historic race.
Yes, the things going through my mind I want to let the listeners know about is they need half the fuel. You know, they're restricted to the 12 litres, and the fuel tanks, original ones, are twice that size. So what I've spotted, the fuel tanks on these machines are under the seat, because the centre of gravity, where they choose to put the weight, is there. And I've spotted, when I've seen them uncovered, that the tanks for this race have been built half the size, you know, again to stop that sloshing around and keep the weight where they want it. The other thing I want to mention is it's huge still on tyres and energy, because they're going to be pushing so hard, like almost time attack laps, which is really hard on those two things. And as Lewis mentioned earlier, it'll be really interesting to see who approaches it what